She lived alone for years, until a stranger with a baby asked, "Can we stay one night?" Lyra lived alone on the outer edge of the planet called Urindor. The wind never stopped, carrying fine red dust across the empty plains and through the small windows of the old research outpost she called home. Most people had left years ago, fleeing the harsh storms and the uncertainty of the planet's unstable terrain. But Lyra had stayed. She had no one else, and in some quiet, stubborn way, she liked it. She had learned to trust herself, to find comfort in routine and in the hum of the old machines she maintained. Every morning, she rose before the sun crested the jagged mountains in the distance. The first thing she did was check the solar panels outside, brushing off the dust with a long-handled brush she had repaired many times. The panels were old, scratched, and uneven, but they still worked. They powered her small outpost, the water purifiers, and the tiny hydroponic garden she had cultivated in one corner of the lab. Without them, she would have had nothing. Lyra often thought about the people who had left and wondered if they remembered her or even thought of her at all. But she quickly pushed the thought aside. It didn't serve her to dwell on things she could not change. Her mornings were filled with routine. After the solar panels, she checked the water tanks, monitoring the filters and adjusting the pressure. The water had to be just right, especially for the small plants she grew for food. She loved these plants, not because she enjoyed gardening, though she did, but because they reminded her that life could survive even in the harshest conditions. She carefully tended lettuce, beans, and a few fruiting plants that stubbornly clung to life, despite the red dust that sometimes coated their leaves. She spoke to them quietly, not because she expected a response, but because talking to something, anything, reminded her that she was alive. After the daily chores, Lyra would sit at her workbench and examine old equipment from the abandoned colony. She loved machines, wires, and circuits, and she had a talent for making broken things work again. Sometimes she would laugh quietly to herself as a rusted piece of machinery whirred back to life, spinning and humming in the sunlight that filtered through the dusty windows. It was her own little world, and she was the only one in it. Despite her solitude, Lyra never felt completely alone. The outpost was filled with reminders of the people who had once been here. She had journals, old data logs, photographs, and small trinkets left behind by scientists and explorers who had called this place home before it fell silent. She would read the logs occasionally, imagining the voices of those long gone. Sometimes she laughed at their clumsy mistakes. Sometimes she shook her head at their overly cautious decisions. But mostly, she felt a sense of respect for their efforts. Humanity had tried to make a home on Urindor, and she was the last witness to that attempt. The afternoons were often quiet, filled with the occasional hum of wind against the walls or the distant groan of shifting rock formations outside. Lyra liked these moments because they allowed her to think. She thought about the colony's past, about the strange creatures that roamed the planet's surface at night, and about the possibilities of other humans out there somewhere. She wondered if anyone else had survived in hidden outposts, or if she truly was alone in this part of the galaxy. She never expected to find out, and she had learned to be content with the unknown. Evenings were her favorite time. The sky over Urindor was wide and endless, filled with stars that burned brighter than anything she had ever seen on Earth. She often climbed to the roof of the outpost to watch them, letting the cold wind whip her hair and brush against her face. She felt small under that vast sky, yet somehow strong. The stars reminded her of the vastness of the universe, but also of the potential for humanity to reach beyond its limits. She had once believed when she was younger that humans could settle any world, build any city, and create life in the emptiest spaces. Now, watching the stars alone, she still believed it, but in a quieter, more patient way. She was interrupted from her reverie one evening by a soft, distant sound she hadn't heard in years. It was faint, almost impossible to notice over the roar of the wind, but Lyra had learned to listen carefully. She froze, ears straining. There it was again, a faint metallic scrape, the sound of something moving across the rocks far from the outpost. She felt a flicker of curiosity mixed with caution. She had been alone for so long that she knew any unusual sound could mean danger. Most often, it was just the wind shifting rocks or the creatures that roamed the night. But tonight, it felt different. Lyra returned to the outpost and double-checked the perimeter. Her sensors, old but still functional, showed nothing unusual beyond the usual shifting dust and rocks. She sighed, shaking her head. She had imagined it, or maybe the wind had caused it. Still, she kept her old rifle close. She had never used it on anyone, and she hoped never to, but she wasn't foolish enough to leave herself unprotected. Inside, she prepared a small meal, dried protein, a few vegetables from the hydroponics, and water. She ate slowly, savoring the flavors she had grown herself. The solitude was heavy at times, but she had grown used to it. She had learned to find joy in the smallest things. The way sunlight hit the walls in the morning, the soft hum of machinery, or the faint green shoots of a new plant pushing through the soil. She had learned to be content with herself and her environment, finding purpose in maintaining life, even if it was only her own and a few plants. As the night grew darker, she settled into her routine of reading the old logs and journals. One entry caught her attention. A scientist had written about discovering a hidden cave nearby, a place filled with natural warmth and minerals that could sustain life. Lyra had explored the cave years ago, but she rarely went now. It was a reminder that the planet still held secrets, some beautiful, some dangerous. The entry made her feel a mix of excitement and caution. Even after years alone, the world still had the power to surprise her. The wind outside howled louder, shaking the outpost's walls, and Lyra felt a shiver of both fear and thrill. She had survived storms that would have destroyed others, repaired machines that seemed beyond hope, and tended life in a place where it should not have existed. She knew she could survive almost anything, but she also knew that isolation had changed her. She had grown cautious, careful, and in some ways hardened. She liked it that way. It kept her alive. As she prepared to sleep, she ran one last scan of the outpost and the surrounding area. Nothing unusual appeared. The wind carried her thoughts outward, beyond the mountains, beyond the empty plains, and to the endless night sky. She thought about the possibility of others, the humans who might still be out there somewhere, and the faint hope that she might not always be alone. She pushed the thought aside. It was dangerous to hope too much. But she allowed herself a small smile before resting. That night, as she slept in her small, warm quarters, a quiet sound reached her dreams. Something moved outside, not the wind, not the creatures she had learned to avoid, but something deliberate. She did not wake immediately. She only felt it as a shift in the rhythm of the world she had controlled for so many years. Something was coming, something unknown. And for the first time in a long while, Lyra felt a flicker of curiosity that was stronger than caution. The sun had just risen over the red plains of Urindor when Lyra awoke. Her sleep had been restless, filled with the strange sense that something was waiting beyond the walls of her outpost. She shook off the dreamlike feeling and got up, moving to the window to scan the horizon. The wind had shifted overnight, carrying new patterns of dust and stone across the plains. But what caught her attention was not the wind or the rocks. It was a small shape in the distance. At first, she thought it might be a rock formation blown into an unusual shape by the planet's relentless storms. But as she squinted, adjusting for the early sunlight, she saw movement. It was slow, cautious, deliberate. Someone or something was walking toward her outpost. Her heart beat a little faster, but not with fear. She had survived alone on this planet for years. Fear was a tool, not a master. Still, curiosity pressed her forward. She moved quietly to the observation panel, turning on the long-range sensors she had repaired years ago. The old screen flickered to life, displaying a faint heat signature. There were two signatures, one large and one tiny. Lyra froze. Two humans? That was impossible, or at least extremely unlikely. She scanned again. Yes, the larger signature was clearly a person walking slowly. The smaller one, it was held in the person's arms. A baby. Lyra blinked, unsteady for a moment. She had seen humans in her past, in the old logs, in the stories of the colony. But to see one, two, really, after so many years of solitude, it was almost unreal. She felt a mix of disbelief and curiosity. Who were they? How had they survived out here? And why were they coming to her? The figure drew closer, and Lyra had to make a decision. She could remain hidden, watch them from a distance, and wait for them to leave. That would be the safe choice. She had spent years alone, trusting no one, surviving without relying on anyone. But there was something about the way the figure carried the baby, carefully, protectively, that stirred a sense of responsibility. She could not simply watch from afar. She moved to the reinforced door of the outpost, checking the locks and the perimeter controls. Everything was functional. She would be able to see anyone who approached too closely. She waited, holding her breath, as the stranger finally emerged from the heat-hazed distance and walked up to the landing pad outside her outpost. "Hello," a voice called out. It was hoarse, weak, but polite. Lyra recognized the tone immediately. It was someone asking for help. She opened the reinforced door slightly, just enough to see the stranger's face. The person was young, probably no more than 25 or 26, with tired eyes and unkempt hair. Their clothes were dusty, worn from travel, and their hands shook slightly as they held the small baby close to their chest. "Can we stay one night?" the stranger asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Please, just one night, we're being chased." Lyra studied them, her mind racing. Being chased? On this planet? That was dangerous. Urindor was harsh enough without adding pursuers to the mix. Yet she saw the fear in the stranger's eyes, the exhaustion, and the gentle way they held the baby. She had survived harsh storms, hostile creatures, and isolation. She could survive a visitor. "All right," she said after a moment, surprising herself with how calm her voice sounded. "One night, no more." The stranger nodded quickly, relief flooding their face. "Thank you." "Thank you so much." Lyra stepped aside and gestured for them to enter. The stranger and the baby moved carefully into the outpost. The baby cooed softly, a small, innocent sound that seemed almost impossible in this harsh world. Lyra felt a strange warmth in her chest. It had been years since she had heard a baby cry, and the sound reminded her of the fragility and hope of life. Inside, she led them to a small room she had kept for emergencies, though she had rarely used it. It was simple, clean, with a cot, some blankets, and a small heater. She set down supplies, clean water, some protein packets, and the small hydroponic vegetables she had grown herself. The stranger introduced themselves quietly. "I'm Kale," they said, voice still tired but calmer now. "This is Nira." The baby blinked at her, tiny hands reaching out instinctively. Lyra nodded, smiling faintly. "You'll be safe here," Lyra said. "For one night, after that you leave, understood?" Kale nodded again, though their eyes betrayed a deeper need for reassurance. Lyra could sense it. They had traveled far, fought to survive, and now here in this small outpost, they felt a glimmer of hope. After they settled, Lyra went about her routine, checking the solar panels, the water systems, and the perimeter. She did not let her guard down, but she allowed herself to observe Kale and Nira. The baby was quiet, small arms moving as if sensing safety for the first time in days. Kale watched Lyra with a mixture of gratitude and caution. That evening, Lyra offered them food. They ate quietly, Kale carefully feeding Nira first. Lyra watched them, remembering herself when she had first arrived on Urindor, young and idealistic, eager to explore and survive. There was a spark in Kale's eyes, despite the exhaustion, a spark she recognized. Humans had a way of surviving against impossible odds, and she saw it in them already. Night fell, and the wind outside grew harsher. Lyra checked the perimeter sensors again. Nothing moved. She felt a strange tension, an instinct honed over years of solitude. Something was out there, but she did not know what. She did know that Kale and the baby were vulnerable and she would protect them if necessary. That was instinct. That was humanity. As they sat together, Lyra asked cautiously, "You said you were being chased." "Who is chasing you?" Kale hesitated, their hands tightened around Nira. "Raiders," they said finally. "People who they take anything they want. They've been following us for days. We had nowhere else to go." Lyra nodded slowly. She had heard of raiders before, rogue groups that preyed on isolated travelers. Dangerous, ruthless, and relentless. She did not fear them, not yet, but she respected the danger. She knew she would have to prepare even if the raiders did not arrive tonight. She decided to show Kale around the outpost, keeping one hand near the control panel in case she needed to activate defenses. The place was old, but sturdy. There were still functional drones, communication devices, and storage rooms filled with supplies. Lyra had maintained it meticulously, and she realized now how valuable it could be to someone like Kale. "You'll be safe here for tonight," Lyra said again, as if reassuring herself as much as Kale. "But you need to know the rules. You stay in designated areas. You do not touch anything dangerous, and you do not open doors to the outside without permission." Kale nodded, absorbing every word. Nira yawned and curled closer in Kale's arms. The baby's presence was a reminder of life's fragility and of why humans fought to survive, no matter the odds. Lyra felt a strange sense of connection. She had been alone for so long that she had almost forgotten what it was like to care for another human being in such an immediate, urgent way. Night deepened, and the outpost's lights glowed softly against the harsh darkness outside. Lyra and Cale sat near the small heater, talking quietly. Cale shared fragments of their journey, how they had fled from raiders, how they had scavenged fuel and supplies, how they had kept Nira safe. Lyra listened, impressed by the endurance and resourcefulness Cale had displayed. Humans were remarkable, she thought. Even in the harshest conditions, they found ways to survive. Eventually, Lyra excused herself to check the outpost one more time. She walked through the corridors, scanning the perimeter and listening to the soft hum of machinery. Everything was functioning. The wind outside howled, but the walls held strong. For the first time in years, she felt the strange mixture of anticipation and caution that came with the arrival of another human. Returning to the small common area, she saw Cale asleep on the cot, Nira nestled safely beside them. The sight was simple, ordinary, but it filled Lyra with something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Life, even in its smallest forms, had a way of insisting on continuing. It was a lesson humans had learned long ago, and one she still held close. As she settled near the window, watching the faint stars begin to appear in the dark sky, she felt the unspoken truth of the day. Her life of solitude was ending, at least for now. And though she did not yet know what the future held, she felt ready to face it. Humans were built to survive, to endure, to protect one another. She had proven it to herself over the years, and now she would prove it again, not alone, but with others. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the raiders were still out there. But for tonight, at least, Lyra, Cale, and Nira were safe. And in that fragile safety, there was the quiet, undeniable power of humanity. The morning light filtered through the dusty windows of the outpost, painting the walls in warm shades of gold and red. Lyra awoke early, as she always did, but this time, she did not go straight to the solar panels or the water tanks. She paused and glanced at Cale and Nira, still asleep in the small room she had prepared for them. The baby's tiny chest rose and fell gently, a rhythm so steady and alive that it made the room feel warmer, fuller, almost as if life itself had returned to the outpost. Lyra moved quietly to the kitchen area, not wanting to disturb them. She prepared a small breakfast: protein packs softened in water, fresh greens from her hydroponic garden, and a small piece of rehydrated fruit. The smell of food seemed to wake Cale sooner than expected. The young traveler entered the kitchen, rubbing their eyes with Nira cradled in one arm, cooing softly. "Good morning," Lyra said, setting the tray on the table. "Eat, you'll need your strength." Cale smiled, grateful but still tired. "Thank you." You didn't have to let us stay." "I know," Lyra replied simply. "But I did. One night can turn into a week if I see reason, and you've earned a reason." Her voice held no judgment, only matter-of-fact honesty. She had learned over the years that trust had to be earned, and actions mattered more than words. They ate in silence for a while, the soft clinks of utensils and the faint hum of machinery filling the room. Lyra watched Cale carefully. They moved with purpose, yet there was a caution in their every motion, a sign that the world outside had taught them hard lessons. Lyra understood this instinctively. Survival on Urindor required constant vigilance. After breakfast, Lyra decided it was time to show Cale the outpost. "You need to know what's safe and what's not," she said. "There are doors you don't open, equipment you don't touch, and systems you must leave alone. This place can keep you alive, but it can also hurt you if you're careless." Cale nodded, eyes wide as they followed Lyra through the narrow corridors. The walls were lined with old machines, control panels, and storage units filled with supplies. Lyra demonstrated the hydroponic garden, the water purifiers, and the energy monitors. "Everything here has a purpose," she explained. "If something breaks, it can usually be fixed, but if you touch the wrong button or ignore the readings, it can also fail completely. Life here is a balance between care and knowledge." Cale listened, absorbing every word. Lyra was impressed by their curiosity and willingness to learn. It reminded her of herself years ago, before isolation had made her cautious to the point of almost avoiding human interaction. Teaching Cale was easier than she expected, and it brought back a sense of purpose she had not realized she missed. "Can you really survive out here alone?" Cale asked at one point, glancing at the distant horizon through the reinforced windows. "I mean the storms, the creatures," Lyra smiled faintly. "I have to," she said. There is no one else here but humans can endure a lot. We adapt, we create, and we find ways to survive. Sometimes it's harsh, sometimes it's lonely, but we survive. And when we do, we grow stronger. Kale nodded slowly, understanding not just her words, but the weight behind them. They had been surviving, too, though with fear constantly shadowing every step. Seeing Lyra's confidence, her knowledge, and her calm in the face of danger gave them a rare sense of relief. By midday, Lyra decided it was time for practical training. "You need more than food and shelter," she explained. "You need skills." She led Kale to the old drone bay, where several small drones lay inactive, dust covering their frames. These drones can scout the area, detect movement, and even send signals over long distances. They're not perfect, but they can save your life if you know how to use them. Kale knelt carefully beside one of the drones. Lyra guided their hands as they checked the power source, the sensors, and the small rotors. The baby watched from a safe distance, eyes wide with curiosity. Kale's hands were steady, precise, learning quickly under Lyra's careful supervision. Lyra felt a quiet pride. Humans were remarkable. Even in exhaustion and fear, they could learn, adapt, and improve. Hours passed in this way. Lyra and Kale worked side by side, fixing, calibrating, and testing equipment. They communicated mostly in short, precise words, a rhythm that reflected necessity rather than casual conversation. Occasionally, Kale would ask questions about the planet, about survival strategies, and about the old colony. Lyra answered with patience, recalling her own experiences and observations. She could feel trust beginning to grow, not instant, but like a small seed taking root in harsh soil. As the day progressed, the wind outside began to rise again, carrying red dust that painted the outpost in a strange, almost mystical light. Lyra scanned the sensors, confirming that nothing unusual was approaching, but her instincts told her to remain vigilant. Urindor was beautiful, but beauty often hid danger. She did not tell Kale this. They would learn soon enough that survival depended on awareness, not comfort. During a brief break, Kale asked, "Why stay here? Why not keep moving? There's danger everywhere, and yet you choose to remain alone on a planet like this." Lyra thought about it. She had never asked herself this question out loud in years. "Because here I can survive," she said finally. "Because I can control some of the chaos, because I have purpose, and because sometimes I believe that even in the most isolated places, humanity has a chance to endure, to grow, to matter." She paused, glancing at Nira, who had reached out and touched her finger. The baby's innocence, its small life, reminded her why humans fought to survive. "And sometimes, when someone like you comes along, it reminds me that surviving alone isn't the same as thriving. People make life worth it." Kale looked at her, understanding dawning in their eyes. I think I understand. You've survived not just for yourself, but because you know humans can endure anything." Lyra nodded. "Exactly." The day continued with more work. They repaired minor damage to the outpost's perimeter shields, checked the water filters, and reinforced the entrances. Lyra taught Kale how to read the sensors for storms, how to track movement outside, and how to anticipate mechanical failures before they became emergencies. Kale learned quickly, asking intelligent questions and applying the lessons immediately. Lyra felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was why humans had thrived for centuries, because knowledge was shared, skills were passed down, and cooperation was instinctive. Evening came and the temperature dropped sharply. Lyra lit the small heaters and prepared a simple meal, again encouraging Kale to eat while keeping Nira nearby. They ate quietly, a companionable silence filling the room. Outside, the wind howled against the walls, rattling the panels and sweeping dust across the plains. Lyra's sensors showed nothing unusual, yet she remained alert, her instincts finely tuned by years of solitude. After dinner, they sat near the observation window, watching the distant horizon turn dark. Stars emerged one by one, brilliant against the deep black sky. Lyra felt a strange calm. They were safe for now. Kale had learned much today, and the baby remained unharmed and peaceful. But survival on Urindor always demanded vigilance. Lyra shared some of her strategies for detecting danger, watching the wind patterns, listening for subtle noises, observing the movement of dust and rocks. Kale listened intently, absorbing everything. They asked questions, showing intelligence and adaptability that impressed Lyra. It was the essence of human resilience, quick thinking, adaptability, and an unyielding desire to live. Night deepened, and they prepared to sleep. Lyra secured the outer doors, set the drones on patrol, and checked the perimeter sensors one last time. The wind outside raged like a living creature, but the outpost stood firm, a small island of safety in a harsh world. Kale and Nira slept peacefully, trusting Lyra without knowing why. And for the first time in years, Lyra felt the weight of companionship. She realized that even in isolation, humans thrived not only because of their skill or strength, but because of their ability to connect, to care, and to protect one another. As she watched the stars, Lyra reflected on the day. Kale had survived against all odds. Nira was alive, innocent, and thriving, and she too had survived alone for years, proving her strength. But now, together, they formed a small bond, fragile but powerful. It was the quiet, unspoken truth of humanity. We endure not only for ourselves, but for others, for life itself, for the possibility of hope. And somewhere beyond the horizon, Lyra knew the raiders were still out there. They would come eventually. But for tonight, the outpost held. Humans had built, endured, and protected this place, and they would continue to do so because that was who they were. For Lyra, Kale, and Nira, survival was no longer just a solitary task. It was a shared purpose, a testament to the strength, ingenuity, and enduring spirit of humanity. The night was unusually quiet. The wind still roared outside, sweeping across the red plains like an invisible tide, but something felt different. Lyra stood at the observation window, scanning the horizon through the reinforced glass. Her sensors, old but carefully maintained, had picked up a faint heat signature hours ago. She had not seen it clearly at first, assuming it was a distant creature or a dust anomaly. But now, the signature was moving steadily, approaching the outpost. Lyra's instincts sharpened. She had survived storms, mechanical failures, and years of isolation, but she knew that danger approaching a human outpost was something entirely different. Her eyes shifted to Kale, who was asleep on the cot. Nira nestled safely against them. The baby's small rise and fall with each breath reminded Lyra of why she had to act quickly. Protecting life was instinct, and she would not fail. She moved silently through the corridors, checking the control panels. The outpost had defenses, crude by some standards but effective when used wisely. She powered up the perimeter drones, each small device spinning to life, ready to patrol and scan for movement. She tapped into the old alarm system, ensuring that any breach would trigger lights, sounds, and signals to disorient intruders. Lyra was meticulous, her years of solitude giving her a deep understanding of her environment. Every machine, every sensor, and every panel was a tool. And she intended to use them all. Kale stirred, blinking against the dim light. "What's happening?" they asked quietly, trying not to wake Nira. "Raiders," Lyra said simply, her voice calm but firm. "They've found us. We'll have to defend ourselves." "Stay close and do exactly what I say." Kale nodded, understanding immediately. Survival required discipline, not panic. Nira made a soft sound, sensing tension in the air, and Kale instinctively held them tighter. Lyra set up a small control station near the main doors, her fingers moving over the panels with practiced ease. The drones buzzed softly, moving along programmed routes, scanning for the approaching threat. Outside, the raiders moved cautiously, their silhouettes barely visible against the dark horizon. They were fast, confident, and dangerous. Lyra could tell from their movements they had experience, but experience alone would not be enough here. The outpost was hers, and she knew it better than any intruder ever could. She triggered the first defense, a set of automated lights, bright and disorienting, sweeping across the plains. The raiders froze for a moment, shielding their eyes. Lyra watched their movements through the monitors, noting how they adjusted, how they calculated their next steps. She smiled faintly. Humans were clever, yes, but so was she, and these raiders were not prepared for the traps she had spent years designing. Next, she activated the drone patrols. Small machines zipped quietly across the terrain, scanning with sensors and occasionally emitting short bursts of sound designed to confuse and mislead. Lyra had programmed them for more than simple detection. They could mimic movement, create false heat signatures, and even trigger small flash devices to startle intruders. The raiders paused again, exchanging quick signals among themselves, but they did not anticipate the full complexity of Lyra's system. Kale watched in awe as the outpost came alive. "You set all this up, alone?" they whispered. Lyra nodded, her eyes never leaving the monitors. Alone, but humans can accomplish a lot when they have to. You'll see. The raiders advanced slowly, carefully avoiding the obvious traps. Lyra adjusted her drone routes, directing them to intercept from unexpected angles. One of the machines whirred low to the ground, creating a series of false footprints that led the raiders in circles. Another emitted a high-frequency pulse that made their communication devices squeal and crackle. Confusion began to spread among the attackers. Despite the chaos, Lyra remained calm. Her years of solitude had honed her mind, giving her the patience and clarity to think several steps ahead. She activated a set of barriers at the main entrance, reinforced panels that slid into place with a hydraulic hiss. The raiders tried to force the doors, but the panels were strong and well-maintained. Lyra adjusted the locks remotely, ensuring that each attempt to breach the entryway met resistance. Kale helped by monitoring the drones and sensors. Under Lyra's guidance, they learned quickly, signaling when the raiders were approaching from blind spots or attempting to flank the outpost. Nira remained safe, cradled in Kale's arms, a small, innocent presence that reminded them all of what they were fighting to protect. Hours passed in this tense battle of wits. The raiders tried several approaches, testing the defenses, attempting to break through weak points. Lyra anticipated each move, adjusting systems, redirecting drones, and creating new obstacles on the fly. She used the terrain to her advantage, knowing every hill, rock formation, and sand ridge around the outpost. When the raiders tried to approach from the ridge to the east, Lyra activated a sequence of signal flares that lit up the night, revealing their positions and forcing them to retreat temporarily. Kale was amazed. "You're brilliant," they said quietly, watching a drone swoop down and emit a pulse that caused the raiders to scatter. Lyra allowed herself a brief smile. "Brilliant enough to survive," she said. "That's all that matters." The raiders were clever, but they were not prepared for human ingenuity at its peak. Lyra had spent years learning, experimenting, and perfecting the outpost's defenses. Each system was simple, yet effective, designed for survival, not show. And now that careful planning paid off. The raiders, frustrated and increasingly disoriented, began to withdraw, retreating toward the dark horizon from which they had come. Lyra did not relax immediately. She monitored their retreat, keeping drones active and sensors on high alert. Even a small mistake could allow them to return or regroup. She knew that survival required constant vigilance. Kale, watching closely, seemed to understand that now. Humans did not merely survive by strength. They survived by observation, strategy, and persistence. Finally, the raiders disappeared from the sensors. The wind howled around the outpost, sweeping dust across the plains, but the immediate danger had passed. Lyra exhaled slowly, her body finally relaxing after hours of tense focus. She turned to Kale, who was still holding Nira, their eyes wide with awe and relief. "You did it," Kale said softly, almost in disbelief. "No," Lyra corrected gently. "We did it. Humans survive together." "That's how it works. One mind, one skill, one action at a time. Alone, we endure. Together, we thrive." Kale nodded slowly, understanding not just the words, but the truth behind them. Nira gurgled softly, stretching tiny arms as if to affirm the statement. Life persisted, fragile but determined in the harshest conditions. After ensuring all systems were stable, Lyra guided Kale and Nira to a safe room inside the outpost. They settled down, the heater humming gently, offering warmth against the cold night. Lyra checked the sensors one last time, confirming that the raiders were gone and that no immediate threats remained. She allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The outpost, once a silent testament to solitude, had become a fortress of ingenuity and survival. Lyra reflected on the events of the night. It was not brute force that had saved them, nor luck alone. It was human creativity, intelligence, and perseverance. Each choice, each adjustment, each careful plan had contributed to their survival. Humans had endured even in isolation because they could think, adapt, and act. Kale, watching her, seemed to grasp the full weight of her statement. I think I understand now. You've been surviving all this time because you know how to think ahead, how to use everything around you. That's amazing." Lyra smiled faintly. "It's survival," she said simply. "Nothing more, nothing less, but sometimes survival teaches lessons that go beyond living. Lessons about patience, intelligence, and the value of life itself." The night passed quietly after that. Lyra monitored the perimeter intermittently, ensuring that no other threats approached. The wind continued to roar, but inside, the small group found a fragile sense of safety. Kale slept more soundly now, trusting in Lyra's experience and skill. Nira remained peaceful, a symbol of life preserved against the odds. When dawn began to break over the horizon, painting the plains in soft shades of pink and gold, Lyra allowed herself to rest briefly. She watched the sun rise, thinking of the countless humans who had ventured into harsh worlds, survived against impossible odds, and built life where none seemed possible. She felt pride, not in herself alone, but in humanity as a whole. The raiders had tested them, but they had not prevailed. The outpost, maintained and defended by human skill and ingenuity, had protected life. Lyra, Kale, and Nira remained safe, a testament to the resilience and brilliance of humans in the face of danger. And in that quiet early morning, Lyra knew something profound. No matter how harsh the world, no matter how lonely or dangerous, humans could endure, and they could protect what mattered most. Life, in all its fragile beauty, could survive because humans had the courage, intelligence, and determination to defend it. For now, the threat had passed, but the lesson remained. Human ingenuity, combined with empathy and courage, was a force no danger could easily overcome. And Lyra, alone no longer, understood that she would never face the world by herself again. Together, humans could thrive even in the most hostile places. The morning after the raiders had retreated was quiet in a way that felt almost sacred. The wind still swept across the red plains of Urindor, carrying fine dust that shimmered in the early sunlight, but there was a stillness that had not been there before. Lyra stood at the observation window, scanning the horizon not for danger, but for understanding. She had survived alone for years, but these past days had changed something in her. She realized that life was meant to be shared, even in the harshest of worlds. Kale stirred in the small, common room. Nira nestled safely against their chest. The baby made a small, contented sound, and Lyra felt a warmth she had not experienced in years. She remembered the long stretches of silence she had endured alone, the nights when the wind screamed against the outpost and the stars were the only company she had. Now she had someone to share the quiet moments with, someone who needed her as much as she had needed purpose in the past. "Good morning," Lyra said, her voice gentle. Kale blinked sleepily, offering a tired smile in return. "Morning," Kale replied. We made it through last night thanks to you." "No thanks needed," Lyra said simply. "Humans survive together, that's all there is to it." She paused, letting her words settle in. "But you learned quickly, I'm impressed." Kale looked down at Nira, brushing a small hand over the baby's hair. "I had a good teacher." The day began with the routines that had become familiar to Lyra, checking the solar panels, inspecting water filters, and ensuring the outpost's defenses were fully functional. But this time, Kale assisted actively, moving with confidence and purpose. Lyra watched as they learned to calibrate the drones, adjust sensors, and maintain the hydroponic gardens. Every task they performed with careful attention reminded her of humanity's unique strength, the ability to adapt, to learn, and to improve no matter the odds. By midday, they had repaired minor damage from the storm the previous night. A few panels on the outpost's exterior had been loosened, but Lyra had anticipated this and kept spare parts on hand. Kale assisted, learning how to secure the panels and reinforce weak spots. Nira, content and curious, watched from a safe corner, reaching out occasionally to touch the bright metal of the outpost walls. Lyra smiled, thinking about how fragile yet resilient life could be. "Why did you stay here all alone for so long?" Kale asked suddenly, breaking the quiet rhythm of their work. Lyra paused, considering the question. "I stayed because I could survive here," she said finally, "because I could control some of the chaos, because I had purpose. But mostly, I stayed because I believed that even in isolation, humans could endure. I wanted to prove that life could persist, no matter the circumstances." She looked at Kale, eyes steady. "And now, seeing you and Nira, I see that survival is not enough. Life is meant to be shared." Kale nodded slowly, absorbing the lesson. They had lived by caution and speed, fleeing danger and focusing only on immediate survival. But here, in the quiet strength of Lyra's outpost, they saw a different way of life, a way built not only on endurance but on knowledge, care, and cooperation. The afternoon brought more work. Lyra decided it was time to expand their defenses, beyond the outpost's immediate perimeter. She led Kale to the nearby ridges and taught them how to create simple but effective early warning systems. Motion-sensitive sensors hidden in the rocks, reflective markers to track movement, and small, hidden drones that could relay information back to the control room. Lyra demonstrated each method carefully, emphasizing precision and patience. "You see," she explained, "humans can survive not because we are the strongest, but because we observe, plan, and adapt. We turn the world to our advantage using what we understand. That is our power." Kale followed her instructions closely, placing sensors and reflective markers with care. They learned quickly, demonstrating the same ingenuity Lyra had admired since their arrival. Nira watched with wide eyes, occasionally reaching out to touch a small device, curiosity gleaming in the baby's gaze. Even in the harshest environment, life persisted, growing stronger through attention and care. As the day progressed, Lyra shared stories of the colony that had once thrived on Urindor. She spoke of their successes and failures, the experiments, the explorations, and the lessons learned. Kale listened intently, absorbing every word. These stories were more than history. They were proof of humanity's perseverance, creativity, and the drive to survive and thrive in even the most unforgiving conditions. By evening, the wind had calmed, leaving a strange, peaceful hush over the plains. Lyra prepared a small meal, inviting Kale to sit and rest while she cooked. Nira played quietly nearby, fascinated by the simple motions of daily life. They ate together, the silence comfortable and filled with unspoken understanding. Lyra felt a rare sense of contentment. This was more than survival. This was life, shared and nurtured. After dinner, they moved to the observation room. The stars were emerging, countless points of light against the dark sky. Lyra watched them, thinking about the vastness of space and the countless challenges humanity had faced and overcome. She thought of the raiders, of storms, and of years of isolation. And she realized that humanity's greatest strength was not its weapons or technology, it was its spirit, its intelligence, and its ability to care for life. Kale leaned against the window, holding Nira close. "I've never seen stars like these," they said softly. "They make you feel small, but also like you can do anything," Lyra nodded. "Exactly. The universe is vast, but humans have always found a way to endure, to explore, to create, and to protect life even when it seems impossible." The night passed quietly. Lyra kept the outpost systems active, drones patrolling, sensors monitoring, and lights ready to signal any approaching danger. But she felt a calm assurance. The immediate threat had passed, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to relax fully. Kale and Nira slept peacefully, safe under her watchful care. The next morning, Lyra woke with a sense of purpose she had not felt in a long time. She moved to the observation window and surveyed the plains. The harsh beauty of Urindor stretched endlessly before her, challenging yet alive. She knew that danger could return at any moment, that the raiders or the planet itself could pose threats. But she also knew something more important. Humans were resilient, adaptable, and creative. They could survive and even thrive against unimaginable odds. She turned to Kale and Nira. "We've been through the worst together," she said. "But survival alone is not the goal, life is. And life is meant to be nurtured, shared, and protected." Kale nodded, understanding the weight of her words. They had learned to survive, yes, but here, under Lyra's guidance, they had learned something more profound. They had seen the power of knowledge, cooperation, and ingenuity. They had seen what humans could do when they combined strength of mind with care for others. The days that followed were filled with preparation and planning. Lyra and Kale worked to make the outpost a true refuge, reinforcing walls, expanding the hydroponic garden, and improving the energy systems. They built additional drones, enhanced sensors, and created safe pathways to nearby water sources. Every action was deliberate, every system a testament to human resourcefulness. Nira, curious and playful, became a small symbol of hope and motivation. As the weeks passed, the outpost transformed. It became more than a shelter. It became a safe haven, a place where life could flourish. Lyra trained Kale in engineering, survival strategies, and tactical thinking. Kale, in turn, shared their own insights from their travels, teaching Lyra new ways to anticipate movement and use the environment. Together, they created a system that was far stronger than anything Lyra had built alone. One evening, after a long day of work, Lyra watched Kale and Nira play in the small courtyard. The baby laughed, reaching out for a floating drone that hovered gently above. Kale's smile was wide, unburdened by fear or exhaustion. Lyra felt a sense of peace she had not known for years. Life persisted. Humans endured, and together they could thrive. She reflected on the journey that had brought them here. Years of solitude had taught her self-reliance and resilience. The arrival of Kale and Nira had reminded her of the importance of connection, trust, and cooperation. The raiders had tested their ingenuity and courage. And through it all they had survived, not through strength alone, but through intelligence, empathy, and the unyielding human spirit. The sun rose the next morning, casting long shadows across the red plains. Lyra, Kale, and Nira stood together at the observation window, looking out at the horizon. The world was harsh, unpredictable, and dangerous. But it was also beautiful, full of potential and life. And they, humans who had endured against all odds, were ready to face it together. Lyra turned to Kale. "We've survived the storms, the raiders, and isolation. Now we build something new, not just for us, but for anyone who may come after. Humans endure, and they thrive when they protect life and knowledge. That is our strength." Kale nodded, holding Nira close. "I understand, and I want to help. We can make this place a home, a refuge for life, and a reminder that humans can endure anything." Lyra smiled, feeling a sense of completion. The outpost, once a symbol of solitude, was now alive with purpose. It was a testament to human resilience, ingenuity, and compassion. The world outside would always be harsh, but within these walls, life could flourish. Humans could endure, humans could protect, and humans could build hope even in the most desolate places. As they watched the horizon, the wind carrying the red dust across the plains, Lyra knew this was only the beginning. The future was uncertain, full of challenges and opportunities. But for the first time in years, she felt confident. Together, they could face anything. Life would continue, and humanity's spirit would endure, shining like the stars above Urindor. And in that quiet, endless moment, surrounded by the small but powerful circle of life she had helped preserve, Lyra understood the truth she had carried alone for so long. Humans endure because they protect, they create, and they care. And when they do, life, fragile, beautiful, and unstoppable, persists.